Hey guys, Wisp here. So today I'm going to talk about how you can win 50-50s consistently. So it's common knowledge that fighting games are just applied rock, paper, scissors, but people frequently misunderstand what this means. So if you've ever wondered why Sheik always seems to grab you when you spot dodge, or why you just can't seem to edgeguard top players ever, this video is going to tell you how you can master these random mix-up situations that should be unreactable. This will be Peach-centric, but this is universal to the entire cast, so don't worry too much about whether or not this applies to your character. So the first thing that we need to talk about is the definition of a 50-50. A 50-50 is a situation where you have two players. Player A chooses between options A1 and A2. Player B chooses between options B1 and B2. And then A1 beats B1, which beats A2, which beats B2, which beats A1, and now we're back at the start. And so both players get equal reward from winning, and each one has an option that beats one of the others. There are never any ties. And this is a very simple situation that is best described as a 50-50. Each player chooses between two options and have a 50% chance of winning. This 50-50 is a myth. It doesn't exist in Super Smash Bros. Melee. For starters, every 50-50 in Melee is actually a proportion set of outcomes. This is very similar to what Lod talked about in his How to Improve at Super Smash Bros. Melee guide. He called it the distribution of weights. So in our original 50-50, imagine that if you choose the option B1 and winning will give you a reward of 50, but losing gives you a penalty of 500, you're not likely to choose B1 even though it's a 50-50. This sort of situation shows up in Melee all of the time. That's not all though. So imagine now that we know that B1 has a huge penalty for failure, what if B2, the other option that B has to choose from, has a chance of failure? This is also very similar to how Melee functions, where every option you choose has a corresponding tech skill implication. So say that when you use B2, you'll get a reward of 500 and a penalty of, say, 100, but you'll miss it half the time. So even if you get your reward of 500, even if you choose the correct option, you still have a chance of failure. So we can relate this back to Melee by imagining an opponent is on your shield. Option B1 could be something like a shield grab, where the risk of failure is quite high. Option B2 could be something like a Q drop down smash, which is very difficult to execute, but has high reward and relatively low punish. So at this point, the question becomes, as player B, what option do you choose? You either have to accept the failure penalty from B1 or the execution risk from B2. And the issue here is that either way, you want to avoid the failure penalty from B1, but if you never choose it, then B2 will never work either because you've become predictable. This means that this mix-up that we've shown is actually a bad mix-up for player B. A is actually advantaged in this mix-up, even though B still has even odds of coming out on top. But the real kicker here is Melee is a very fast game, so even though there is a logical strategy to get the most out of this 50-50, no human will ever do that. Humans are habitual creatures, and they're reacting very quickly to these kinds of situations. Your typical human opponent will choose B2 every single time because they're afraid of the risk of B1 instinctively. So these patterns that people unconsciously choose lead to them being predictable. This is why you see Falco laser twice and then dare in. It's why you see Peach take the same approach after they do their FC aerial. They're scared, they do their, what they see as the low risk punish them for attacking me option of down smash. They'll do in-place options on wake up, which lets Sheik grab them. There are all sorts of applications of this pattern. And so I'll talk about a few of the ways that you can have a 50-50 that looks like a 50-50, but it actually breaks down in a couple ways. So the first way that mix-ups turn into fake mix-ups is when either player commits too early, which turns the situation into something more akin to a whiff punish. This is also a common source of edgeguarding woes for worse players, where they will commit too early to where they want to cover. So for Peach, that might be by floating in a spot, and their opponent, if they're paying attention, will react and just recover. This is frequently what causes good players to not get edgeguarded by worse players. You can also use this in reverse. in order to bait a certain recovery that you know how to cover from a given position. An excellent example of this is when Laud totally destroyed Levin with a really sick turnaround turnip throw edgeguard. The second way that mix-ups turn into fake mix-ups is when either player is unaware of all of the options available to them. An example of this might be Peach getting F-thrown by Marth at middle percents. So this knocks you down, and you can actually jump out. And that creates a mix-up in and of itself. But what a lot of people don't know is that you can actually fair, and the startup frames of the fair let you auto-cancel and just land grounded every single time, creating a totally different mix-up situation than either teching or jumping out against Marth. The last way that mix-ups degrade into fake mix-ups is when a player chooses an option predictably or always chooses the same option. A common example of this is when a player gets down thrown by Sheik and they'll tech in the same direction that the DI. So the Sheik only has to react to the DI and not to the tech, which makes it far easier for them to tech chase. This also occurs when one option is very scary or your opponent is scared of you in general. You see this surface a lot with players trying to avoid getting grabbed in the Ices matchup. Although it's justified there, the consequences from a mix-up perspective are the same. In traditional fighting games, this creates the sort of situation where you get grabbed for blocking too much because you're scared. It's the same idea. And so these options taken together are actually where the skill comes in, because if your execution isn't good enough to let you get to the point where you have mix-ups, or you react slowly, or any number of things, then you don't actually get to have the mix-up that you've earned. Your situations will degrade into one of the 3 fake mix-ups. The flip side is also true. If you're playing against a good player, even if you're very fast, if you're choosing options that lose against their options and they can keep up with you, you're never going to win, no matter how well you play. The fact that you need these two together is why there's only one Dreffin, even though if his playstyle were so easy, surely there would be more Dreffins. Of course, there's a Borp and Bonfire 10 and a whole legion of Samus players, but there aren't that many players who utilize this strategy relative to the execution-heavy strategy. So now I want to talk a little bit about how you turn these concepts into actual results. The most obvious way to do this is by looking for these weaknesses and these fake mix-ups in the play of your opponents. This is pretty straightforward, but against a good opponent, it may not be forthcoming. So instead, I want to talk a little bit about what you can do against good players who are trying to look for these weaknesses in you as well, and that's widely referred to as conditioning. So the premise behind conditioning is that you're looking for a situation where your opponent will react to something you do with a specific counterplay. And the idea is that you can use the fact that they have specific counterplay to things that you do to lower how unpredictable they actually are. And so you can essentially set up metagame baits where you convince them that doing something is safe, but it actually is not. And you can use this to get results out of moves that are otherwise very risky, such as Falco's forward smash or Samus's charge shot, any number of things like that. And the nature of how conditioning works means that it works best in matchups where you have repeated interactions, because you need repeated interactions to get any sort of result out of conditioning, let alone to use it multiple times to gain an advantage over a set. This is why you typically see conditioning talked about in matchups that involve floaties, simply because their matches have more interactions. You certainly can condition people in Fox Dittos, but frequently, if you're losing interactions in a Fox Ditto, you'll die very quickly. That's just the nature of the game. If you're struggling to kill a hard-to-kill player, conditioning is a pretty good way to open them up without taking too much unnecessary risk, and the commentators will think that you're amazing because you F-smash them. Obviously, if you have a guaranteed kill confirm on a character, it's better to use that, but at some point, you're playing Marth and your opponent is above 150% and you have to make some hard choices. So that's what conditioning is really for. It's also important to note that when you condition your opponent, almost by definition, you're being an unpredictable player. Conditioning works by setting expectations and then subverting them, which is coincidentally the same way humor works, so I guess conditioning is funny. So if all of this conditioning talk is a little too abstract, the most approachable and easiest way to condition someone is to condition someone with movement. The key is to act like you're moving in a certain way and then do something different. Or pay attention to when your opponent attacks you when you move toward them, or how far they'll chase you if you move away from them. Paying attention to their responses to you occupying certain positions is a great way to get started exploring this concept. And so that's really all there is to mix-ups. It all seems relatively straightforward when you just lay it out and talk about it, but keep in mind that Melee is a very fast game, And so very few people actually play the optimal mix-up game in the way that it's presented here. But it should be the ideal that you strive for, and when you look at your own videos, you should be looking to see how you fall short. Also, I do want to mention that having a good grasp of these concepts is essential for being a strong defensive player. Realize that no character in all of Super Smash Bros. Melee can protect themselves in any situation if your opponent knows exactly what you're going to do. By playing these games properly, you make it so that you're hard to hit and you don't give your opponent anything that they haven't earned yet. So I hope this helped some of you out there. I hope this helped you stop getting grabbed by Sheik over and over and over. I hope you pick up some habits and read a Fox's tech and down smash them to an inch of their life. And I hope you like and subscribe and want to see more videos because I plan to make some. So let me know if this helped you. Peace.